technology platforms. So this is how we see the overlap, and this is how we define the decentralized future. Then comes different parts of what all things you can do with it, right? So these are so-called the offerings, the assets, the capabilities, the accelerators, and so on and so forth. So this is where we see there. A few things in my own judgment here is, first of all, in the journey, there's a lot of skepticism about regulation and compliance, and hence there were significant private deployment of chains started to happen. Now there is a new way of looking at it, very similar to the cloud journey. People are looking for more public chains, and at the same time, when you look at public chain, you also are emphasizing more towards what is my digital identity, what's my KYC, etc. If I sort out those, then I get better value rather than sort of building my own private chains and in my own infrastructure. So those discussions are happening. Of course, the connectivity, interoperability, oracles, the data storage, etc. The other big area for research, we have partnership with multiple research universities around the world, and one of the things I'm seeing, not one, there are many, but the hot research topics are chain analytics. So if you are looking for DeFi like Aave or Uniswap, what kind of analytics that you can build on such transactions. So that is one of the interesting area. DID is the other big area, decentralized identity from a research point of view. Sustainability, we already talked about, using distributed ledger and what does it mean, and so on and so forth. So there are some good, interesting research topics that are emerging out of this. So what we have done is we built a radar, and we built this for all the upcoming sort of technology, what we call as technology domains. We call technology domain, not just technology, because domain means it has industry relevance, use cases, suppliers, partners. We look at holistically. And this is a blockchain radar or a DeFi radar or a decentralized future radar, whatever you want to name it. What we do here is, if you double click on each of these bubbles, you get an idea of the foundational technologies, partners who are supporting those technology, concepts like zero knowledge proofs or POS or PPOS and things like that, or the use cases. So we look at holistically, because there's no point in just looking at technology in isolation. The second thing I talked about, taxonomy, so we keep building this. So right now we are supporting 6 areas within the decentralized future taxonomy. This is version 2. Again, as you imagine, every 6 months we see the things moving in this direction. The idea of taxonomy is, if you double click this, so you get to know what is CBDC, what's the industry relevance, where do we stand in maturity, who are the partners, how do I start a CBDC journey, retail, wholesale, interoperability, all the things that you require in this space. Similarly, if you go here, digital assets, you get, okay, what are digital assets? Starting from bonds tokenization to energy trading, right? So all the life cycle management, settlement, and so on. So each box has its relevance towards the industry. If you go one more step further, and this is where we are consulting company, so we can complicate the slide further. Okay. So if you look at further, right? So just in the banking context alone, we can look at central banks use cases into the taxonomy of CBDCs, or you can look at capital markets, because if you look at institutional banking, so most of the banking conferences today, if you see, they are all moving out or away from retail banking. So everybody is interested in now in institutional banking, capital markets, which is exchange and trade, transaction banking, treasury, and so on. So this is how the different use cases we map to the taxonomy. The last thing I would like to cover in the sequence, if you see the sequence, we have technology, we have radar, we have the overlaps where the industries will find use cases, etc. Right? The last thing which I want to highlight, and this is, we published this in books as well, I can share some of the links here. If I am a 200-year-old or 150-year-old bank or an organization, what will my journey would look like embracing DeFi, Web3, Metaverse going forward? So if I'm an organization, then one of the way I will move is a clockwise direction. That means I'm a traditional bank. That means I do all the traditional banking business. Then I do digital banking. We are all familiar with digitization of banking process as well as using digital versions of bank. Then you go open and beyond banking. So open and beyond banking is your CDR and the regulation that started where I can practically exchange data from different financial institutes for the benefit of customer. Till here, till about 1 to 9, okay, we still talk about banking in the traditional context, even though it is digital, because you are using the same form of money and same form of governance. Now, when you go to 10, 11, and 12, that changes. So here you are now starting to introduce the concepts of new forms of coins, currencies, right? It may be central bank currencies or otherwise. And you are also started to introduce new forms of governance of how you engage your partners or how you engage yourselves and so on. Then if you move further from 12 onwards, you are introducing another layer. Now you have digital, you have new forms of currency and governance. Now you have a virtual world also, right? So you can probably insure a metaverse land, or you can probably help to do a commerce transaction within buying and selling digital assets in the metaverse. So you move towards more on the virtual side of the world. So from 1 to 15 is what we see as a journey. This need not be always in this direction. Maybe you can start here if you are a DeFi company and maybe move towards the left if you want to introduce complex financial products, or you are in metaverse, you may start here, etc. So that's the way the evolution is going. So I have lots of case studies because this was the case study which we did with ANZ on MAS pilot in Singapore. One of the 15 finalists, we were in CBDC. This was the case study we did for Saudi Central Bank on wholesale CBDC's exchange. This was the case study we did with SWIFT on interoperability of CBDCs between different blockchain and non-blockchain networks, etc., etc. I have tons of them. I'm happy to talk about. This morning we talked about Metaverse, right? So the context of Metaverse, as you started, there is a social and there is enterprise. Our interest is what can an enterprise do in Metaverse, and there is. These are my 6 observations for today in the Metaverse area. The primary use cases today for enterprises is about how can I engage new talent, recruitment in Metaverse, or doing a marketplace, learning, etc., etc. But what's also happening is there is a little bit of a friction. On one side, some of the banks have gone and bought a land in Sandbox or Decentraland, etc. And they're saying, I have a virtual office and blah, blah, blah. The other side of banks and insurers are saying that doesn't make sense, because if I'm not going to a branch in the physical world, why will I go to a branch in Metaverse? So we need to relook at the whole business model of where Metaverse makes sense, as opposed to just replicate what I do currently in a digital world. So there's 2 different schools of thoughts in mind. But whatever said and done, in the context of Metaverse, there are three main themes. One is obviously around experience. So how can I improve my customers' experience or attract new customers? The second theme is about commerce. Finally, if a customer I'm engaging in Metaverse, he has to do something, some transaction, some payments, something of that nature. And the third is risk. So what am I introducing as additional risk? The risk of data protection, risk of whatever that is happening. So this was a recent DBS visit in Singapore Fintech Festival. This was our Royal Bank of Canada. This is what we did for HSBC, etc. So there's tons of information. Everybody is interested to do something in Metaverse. And this was our LinkedIn recruitment event which we ran in the US, which was on Metaverse, where you can come and have a chat. And I'm sure Swinburne can do one here in Australia, or Monash for that matter. And then we talked about Algorand. We work closely with Algorand. CPO Michali is one of our advisors, so he's presented to us multiple times. So pleased to see Monash partnership and happy to chat about that. We also have launched an employee marketplace on NFTs. This is nothing to do with money part is just to have fun. So all our rewards recognitions can be now given to employees through this channel so that they start to build awareness and knowledge of this. We also have built an insurance hub on Metaverse on different insurance scenarios and so on and so forth. So the reason is not to say everything, but to give you a flavor of, in a taxonomy, you have 6 areas from currencies all the way up to Web3. In each area, that you will see the flavors and the partnerships and use cases. So pause here. Thank you and happy for you to ask any questions.